പ്രിയ വിദ്യാർത്ഥികളെ, നമ്മുടെ SS വിശദീകരണ ക്ലാസ്സിൽ ഹിസ്റ്ററിയിലെ 4th ചാപ്റ്റർ ബ്രിട്ടീഷ് എക്സ്പ്ലോയിറ്റേഷൻ ആൻഡ് റെസിസ്റ്റൻസ് എന്ന ചാപ്റ്ററിലൂടെയാണ് നമ്മൾ ഇന്ന് കടന്നു പോകുന്നത്. ഈ ചാപ്റ്ററിൻ്റെ ഓഡിയോ വീഡിയോ സഹിതമുള്ള ഒരു ക്ലാസ്സാണ് നമ്മൾ നിങ്ങൾക്ക് അറേഞ്ച് തരുന്നത്. അതിലെ സബ് ടോപ്പിക്കുകളാണ് ഇമ്പാക്റ്റ് ഓഫ് ബ്രിട്ടീഷ് പോളിസീസ്, ദെൻ കൊമേഴ്സ്യലൈസേഷൻ ഓഫ് അഗ്രികൾച്ചർ, then struggle storms jungles, that is the tribals revolt, then decline of traditional industries, first war of Indian independence, 1857 revolt, finally realizing the exploitation of Britishers. ഇതാണ് നമ്മുടെ ടോപ്പിക്കുകൾ ഇന്നത്തെ. ഒന്ന്, ഇമ്പാക്റ്റ് ഓഫ് ബ്രിട്ടീഷ് പോളിസീസ്, ബ്രിട്ടീഷ് പോളിസികളുടെ അല്ലെങ്കിൽ ബ്രിട്ടീഷുകാരുടെ ഭരണത്തിൻ്റെ അനന്തരഫലങ്ങൾ. കൊമേഴ്സ്യലൈസേഷൻ ഓഫ് അഗ്രികൾച്ചർ, കാർഷിക മേഖലയുടെ വാണിജ്യവൽക്കരണം. സ്ട്രഗിൾ സ്റ്റോംസ് ജംഗിൾസ് എന്ന് പറഞ്ഞാൽ ഗോത്രവർഗ്ഗക്കാരുടെ കലാപങ്ങൾ. ദെൻ ഡിക്ലൈൻ ഓഫ് ട്രഡീഷണൽ ഇൻഡസ്ട്രി, നമ്മുടെ നാട്ടിലെ പരമ്പരാഗതമായ വ്യവസായങ്ങളുടെ തകർച്ച. ദെൻ ഫസ്റ്റ് വാർ ഓഫ് ഇന്ത്യൻ ഇൻഡിപെൻഡൻസ്, 1857 റിവോൾട്ട്. ദെൻ റിയലൈസിങ് ദ എക്സ്പ്ലോയിറ്റേഷൻ, ബ്രിട്ടീഷുകാരുടെ ചൂഷണങ്ങൾ നമ്മൾ തിരിച്ചറിയും.
British exploitation and resistance. Europeans came to India for trading purposes. Among the Europeans in India, Britain had the upper hand. It was after the Battle of Plassey in 1757, Britain began to play as a dominant power. Within the next 100 years, 60% of the region in Indian subcontinent had come under direct control of the British. The rest of the regions were ruled by native kings who had been subjugated to the British. British implemented policies which would help them to pursue their economic interest in India. Therefore, the impact of the British was more visible in the economic sector. Prior to the British domination, India was a rich agricultural country with a self-sufficient village economy. It was the land revenue system implemented by the British that destroyed the backbone of the farmers. British implemented 3 types of land revenue systems in India: permanent land revenue settlement, Rayatwari system and Mahalwari system were these 3 settlements. Of these, first one was permanent land revenue settlement. This settlement was introduced by the British Governor-General Lord Cornwallis. It was introduced in the regions like Bengal, Bihar and Orissa. In the permanent land revenue system, the tax was collected by Zemindars. Therefore, Zemindar was the owner of the Indian land where he had the jurisdiction to collect tax. While Zemindars became the owners of the land, the actual farmers became tenants. Farmers were to pay up to 60% of the yield as tax. Tax was to be paid even at the time of poor yield. One of the important features of this settlement was, unlike other settlement, tax was to be paid in cash before cut-off date. The Yonwari system is the second settlement. It was introduced mainly in South India. In this system, farmers were the owners of the land. Therefore, tax was collected directly from the farmers. Tax rate was very excessive, and also tax rates were frequently increased. Mahwari system was the third settlement. This system was introduced in the northwestern India. In this system, village headman was assigned the responsibility to collect tax. The tax rate was very excessive in this system too. Here, the entire village was considered as a single unit for tax collection. The land revenue policies implemented by the British effectively The loan was obtained by mortgaging agricultural land. The agricultural land of the farmers, who could not pay back the loan and interest, was seized by the moneylenders. Commercialization of agriculture was a phenomenon developed during the British rule. Traditionally, the peasants in India were engaged in agriculture mainly to produce things only to meet the need of their family and the village. During the British rule, they were compelled to cultivate crops according to the market's needs. This new development is called commercialization of agriculture. Indian farmers were ready to cultivate crops like indigo, cotton, jute, sugarcane and tea. Because these crops were easily saleable in the market. In Europe also, these crops were in high demand. Thus, Indian land became the cultivating field for Europe. There were many reasons behind this transformation. During these days, farmers had to pay taxes in cash. As these new crops were easily saleable in the market, farmers were ready to cultivate as it would help them to pay taxes before cut-off date. Turbulent indigo field. Indigo farmers were one of the victims of the British exploitation. During these days, indigo was used for dyeing clothes. With the Industrial Revolution in the 18th century in England, the demand for indigo increased. By the early decade of the 19th century, around 95% of indigo was exported from India. So, it was necessary for the British industrialists to get indigo plantations spread more regions in India. The farmers succumbed to the temptation of the British and accepted the advance amount from the British as they were in trouble with no other means to pay the heavy land tax. Each farmer who accepted advance amount from the British compelled to cultivate indigo at the most important part of their agricultural land. Due to the interference of the British agents in the harvesting seasons, the farmers received only a lower price for indigo. Later, when the artificial colors were invented, indigo became obsolete. This made the plight of the farmers more miserable. The Indigo Revolt. The indigo farmers resorted to revolt owing to the severe exploitation and endless mysteries. In 1859, the farmers of Bengal organized themselves and declared that they were giving up indigo cultivation. They attacked indigo factories with the bows, arrows and spears. The rioters excommunicated the British supporters and those who worked for the British. Hearing the news, several educated people from Calcutta reached the remote area and extended their support. After suppressing this revolt, British appointed a commission to study about the problems faced by indigo farmers. The commission found that indigo farming was uneconomic and proposed to stop it. Peasant revolts in Kerala. Protest against British rule in Kerala was more reflected in the form of farmers' rebellions. British directly ruled Malabar witnessed more peasant struggles. It was the Muslim peasant community in Malabar, called Mappillers, who revolted against British. Therefore, these revolts are known as Mappiller rebellions. Mappillers were the tenants who cultivated the land obtained on the lease from the landlords. It was the exploitation and suppression of the landlords and the British that led to the revolts in Malabar. Malabar witnessed around 22 revolts. To suppress these revolts, British raised a special armed police battalion named Malabar Special Police. cause of the struggle was the unfair land revenue system of the British. Struggles, storm champions. Tribals were another victims of British rule. Since tribals were dependent on forest produce, the forest tax imposed by the British made their life miserable. Using this act, British declared the forests that were abundant with the trees as protected forest. As a result of this, tribal livelihood like gathering forest produce, cattle rearing, shifting cultivation, and hunting became very difficult. But the British widely felled trees from forests to lay railway lines, build ships, and for plantation. Apart from these, the British levied high tax rates on the forest produce collected by the tribals. These situations led the tribes to fight against the British. Cymriche revolt was another tribal insurgency against the British. Cymriche and Cromers were two tribes of Wynad. Imposition of tax by the British, compulsion for paying tax in cash, and seizing of agricultural land for non-payment of tax were the main reason for this revolt. The revolt was led by the Cymriche leader, Rahman Nambi. Several people other than the tribes also joined the struggle. Finally, the British government suppressed the struggle and killed Rahman Nambi. In 19th century, several other tribal insurgencies broke out in different parts of India. Pahari Rebellion, Bill Rebellion, Kol Rebellion, Munda Rebellion, and Kasi Rebellion are the examples of such tribal rebellions. Another phenomenon witnessed during the British rule was the destruction of traditional industries. Indian textile industry was very popular in the contemporary world. With the coming of the British, the textile industry was completely ruined. There were many reasons behind it. The most important reason was the mechanization of the textile industry. After the Industrial Revolution, Britain witnessed a spurt in the textile production. The machine-made textiles imported from Britain could be sold easily for they were cheap. On the other hand, handmade Indian clothes were comparatively costly. It negatively impacted the Indian textile industry. Another reasons behind the destruction of Indian industry was the expansion of railway. British built railway lines across India in order to save their economic interests. It helped the British to carry the imported fabrics from the port to the interior regions, and the cotton collected from the villages to the port for exporting to Britain. Thus, Indian weavers lost their business in their village market too. Another reason for the destruction of Indian industry was excessive tax rate. British imposed a heavy tax on Indian-made goods. As a result of these, Indian goods become very costly in British market. It resulted in losing its demands. Another reason behind the destruction of Indian industry was the torture and exploitation of British officials. British officials behaved very badly with Indian industrialists. As a result of this, the people who had been working in the textile industry left their job. Many people migrated to villages and engaged in agriculture-related works. As a result of this, the number of people working in agriculture fields has increased. It resulted in the fragmentation of agricultural land. It negatively impacted the agricultural production. The status of handicrafts in villages was not different under the British rule. In a nutshell, British destroyed India in all walks of life. As a result of this, famine first organized attempt by Indians to dethrone British administration. This revolt has many features. Unlike the previous revolts, which are confined to a particular region, this revolt was almost all Indian in nature. In this revolt, kings, farmers, and laymen organized as a group to dethrone British administration. There were many reasons behind the outbreak of this revolt. It were the Indian farmers and craftsmen who suffered more under British rule. When the revolt broke out, they targeted moneylenders along with the British. Another important group participated in this revolt was Indian kings. The British rule had adversely affected the kings. Many Indian kings lost their kingdom because of policies like doctrine of lapse. In addition to this, many princely states were convicted of the inefficient rule and were annexed by the British. All these incidents made the Indian kings to lead the rebellion against British. Another group which took arms against the British was Indian sepoys. Poor salary and abuse by the British officers were the major reasons for their resentments. The immediate reason for the breakout of the revolt was the use of newly introduced Enfield cartridge. The rumour that the cartridge in the newly supplied Enfield rifle were greased with the fat of cow and pigs provoked them. It hurted the religious sentiments of the Hindu and Muslim soldiers. The soldiers who were unwilling to use the new cartridge were punished by the officers. The first instance of the resentment against the British Army was seen in Barrackpore in Bengal. An Indian soldier named Mangal Pandey shot at a British officer who forced him to use the new cartridge. He was arrested and hanged to death. This incident triggered the First War of Independence. When the revolt broke out, people from all walks of life, including kings, farmers, craftsmen, etc., took part in it. They attacked the British and moneylenders and set fire to their account books, deals, and documents. The salient feature of this rebellion was active participation of the common people like farmers and craftsmen. For example, out of 1.5 lakhs of people who were killed in the attack, 1 lakh were common people. The real strength of the rebellion was the Hindu-Muslim unity, and the spirit of cooperation existed among the soldiers, common people, and the leaders. The revolt spread to different parts of the country. The rioters captured Delhi and declared the Haderja II as the Emperor of India. Now the rioters got a leader. Apart from these, there were many regional leaders in the different parts of the country. The Haderja II of the Delhi, Rani Lakshmibai in Jhansi, Begum Hazrat Mahal of Lucknow, Nana Sahab, and Thambiyatholi of Kanpur, and Maulavi Ahmedullah of Faizabad are the examples of these regional leaders. In the initial days of the outbreak, the rioters had the upper hand, but as the days progressed, the rioters could not overcome the superior military power of the British, and the rebellion was completely suppressed. It brought about several changes in the policies and administration of the British. The British Parliament took over India from the British East India Company. After this revolt, the economic exploitation of the British reached the extreme level. After this revolt, the starvation death was a common phenomenon. For example, in the second half of the 19th century, around 2 crores of people died, spread over 24 great famines. Realizing exploitation. The economic exploitation of the British created an anti-British feeling among different sections of people. This attitude was a major factor that led to the emergence of Indian nationalism in the 19th century. Nationalism is the sense of unity among the people of the irrespective of caste, creed, religion, and region. Indian National Congress was an example of such an organized form of nationalism. Indian National Congress was formed in December 1885 in Bombay. 72 delegates from different parts of India attended its first session. The earlier leaders of Congress were much conscious of the economic exploitation of the British and the resultant poverty faced by the Indians. They unveiled the British attempt to convert India as a market for selling British products and a mere centre for collecting raw materials for the British industries. They pointed out that life had become a burden when the production and distribution of consumer items like salt came under the control of the British government. Dadabhai Naoroji was at the lead in pointing out such discrimination. Through his studies, he publicised the fact that deterioration of Indian economy under the British rule. His studies were based on empirical data. He established the fact that a huge amount of money was flown to Britain every year. He proved that the drain of wealth was the root cause of poverty and starvation in India. His findings, known as drain theory, is included in this work called Poverty and Un-British Rule in India. Wealth of India was drained to Britain in 4 ways. 1. In the form of export of Indian raw material. 2. In the form of salary and pension to the British officers in India. 3. Through profit gained by selling of the British products in India. 4. Through taxes collected from India. The earlier leaders like Ramesh Chandra Dutt and Gopala Krishna Gokhale had a pivotal role in making the common people aware of the economic policy of the British that impoverished India. The common people realised that the poverty and exploitation they faced had been the creation of the British. It has reinforced their anti-British attitude. The nationalism born out of such awareness is termed as economic nationalism. To check economic trade, the early national leaders pleaded with the people to boycott foreign goods and strengthen Indian industry by consuming Indian products. Partition of Bengal in 1905 was a major breakthrough. As part of agitation, foreign goods were collected and burnt publicly. The extensive use of indigenous products by discarding foreign items rejuvenated Indian industry. As a result, a number of textiles mills, soap factories, matchbox companies, national banks, and insurance companies were established. Import of British goods to India steadily went down. Massive participation of women, labourers, and students were another remarkable feature of this moment. Washermen took a pledge that they would not wash foreign cloths, and the priests swore that they would not perform rituals and prayers using foreign items. Women boycotted foreign bangles and utensils. Students quit schools to take part in the movement. Indian nationalism attained further strength from Swadesi movement. Leaders like Balagangadhar Tilak, Lala Lajpat and Bipin Chandra Pal emphasized the necessity of overthrowing the foreign rule. These leaders, together known as Lal Bal Pal, it was Balagangadhar Tilak who inspired people much. He declared that Swaraj is better than the best form of foreign rule. It was these protests that would transform as Indian nationalism in the years to come.